It started with a sound, sharp, echoing, unsettling. Not the call of a director, not the roll of a camera. It was the metallic slam of an SUV door, the kind that makes every crew member freeze for a split second. The kind that tells you something has arrived, or someone. But this wasn't just anyone. This was Meghan Markle, stepping onto an Amazon MGM lot for the first time in 4 years, walking straight into what staff would later call the longest day in studio history. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Think about that. A company that's filmed explosions, disasters, and chaotic live sets. Yet the crew claimed this one day topped them all. How could one actress, one entrance, cause such a seismic reaction? Was it the reputation that preceded her? The rumors that followed her across continents? Or was it something that happened inside those walls that no one was ever supposed to see? Let's rewind. Because this wasn't just a comeback. This was a gamble. Meghan had been away from acting since the royal years. Her last major appearance in Suits long before palaces, titles, and televised interviews became her stage. Now she was back, not as a duchess, but as a performer again, cast in Jason Orley's highly anticipated Amazon MGM feature Close Personal Friends. A film quietly described by insiders as a Hollywood redemption piece. But redemption only works if the audience is ready to forgive. And the industry? It was watching her every move. From the outside, it looked like a perfect setup. A respected director known for emotional depth. A modern story about friendship, loyalty, and betrayal, themes that eerily mirrored her own public life. Yet, behind the glass facade of Studio 7, something was already cracking. Staff emails had been circulating for days about unique on-set guidelines for a special VIP guest. Translation? Everyone was to be on high alert the moment she arrived. You could feel it, the unease, the performance anxiety of an entire crew trying not to offend someone whose name could dominate headlines within minutes. One lighting tech later said, "We were more nervous about the actress than the scene itself." That's not normal. That's not filmmaking. That's walking on eggshells. And then she arrived. A sleek black SUV rolled past the gates at exactly 9:37 a.m., trailed by 2 additional vehicles carrying assistants, stylists, and, strangely, a pair of individuals none of the security personnel recognized. When the door opened, it wasn't the confident stride of a star returning home. It was something else. Observers said her expression was unreadable, part determination, part calculation. A small pause before stepping out, as if she was weighing the energy of the place. Cameras, not studio ones, but handhelds, briefly glinted from behind tinted windows. Within minutes, her presence changed the rhythm of the lot. Conversations lowered. Crew heads turned. Even the sound of a dropped clipboard echoed louder than usual. Something about her aura seemed to pull the air tight around everyone. Some described it as charisma. Others called it control. But whichever it was, it filled the space like static before a storm. And yet, this was supposed to be the day everything went right. Jason Orley, known for his calm and easygoing direction style, had been briefed to expect professional excellence and smooth operations. Instead, he was about to witness a scene that would leave the studio reeling for weeks. But at this point, no one knew that the trouble wasn't just coming. It had already arrived, hidden in plain sight. Here's the contradiction that hooked everyone later. Meghan had been marketed as reformed. Polished. Ready. Publicists used words like humble and focused. But insiders described a different energy altogether, tense, territorial, rehearsed in a way that felt more royal press conference than Hollywood production. She wasn't walking onto a set. She was entering a battlefield disguised as a film shoot. So what went wrong? Was it the pressure to reclaim her old stardom? The weight of being watched by critics waiting to pounce? Or was there something far more deliberate? A plan that the rest of the crew hadn't signed up for? The whispers began almost immediately. The director's assistant overheard muttering into his headset, "We have unlisted personnel near the south exit." Security radios flickered. Studio managers exchanged looks. And somewhere, in the corner of the lot, a group of photographers began adjusting their lenses. Too early, too precisely, too perfectly positioned. They weren't supposed to be there, but they were. The tension built fast. Crew members fumbled props. Someone missed a lighting cue. The first scene of the day, a quiet dialogue moment, was pushed back. The word paparazzi floated through the room like a curse. And just like that, the carefully constructed illusion of order began to slip. But why were photographers there at all? This was a closed set. No external press allowed, no leaks permitted. Unless, of course, someone wanted them there. And that's where Jason Orley's staff first started asking questions. Not about the photos, but about the timing. The moment Meghan's car crossed the gate, lenses clicked. The moment she entered the building, they stopped. It was almost as if they'd been summoned, directed to capture her arrival, then vanish before questions could form. But by the time the first coffee break rolled around, those questions had already turned into accusations. Some staff whispered she'd orchestrated it. Others thought it was sabotage, a ploy from a rival to catch her off guard. Meghan, on the other hand, looked composed. Too composed. As if she knew exactly how much chaos she was walking into. There's something fascinating about that, isn't there? The way one person can dominate an entire environment without raising their voice. The way every movement becomes a headline before the cameras even roll. But for all her calm, something in her eyes betrayed the strain. A flicker, a flash, maybe fear, maybe fury. Or maybe the dawning realization that this comeback moment was slipping away from her control. By lunchtime, nothing had been filmed. The crew had spent 6 hours waiting, adjusting, whispering, and pretending not to stare. Jason Orley paced the soundstage with a headset and a half-eaten sandwich, trying to hold the production together. Assistants clutched clipboards like shields. Meanwhile, social media was already buzzing. Somehow, photos from that very morning had surfaced online. Coincidence? Hardly. The headlines were merciless. Meghan returns to set after years away. Hollywood divided. But inside the studio, the mood wasn't divided. It was unified in one feeling: dread. Because now everyone knew this wasn't just a filming day. It was a media circus unfolding live, and nobody wanted to be the next headline casualty. Still, Meghan pressed forward. She greeted actors, flashed smiles, gave direction notes that weren't hers to give. One crew member later said, "It felt like she wasn't acting, she was directing us." But Jason Orley didn't push back. Not yet. Maybe he thought it would settle down. Maybe he believed in second chances. Maybe he underestimated how far things would go. By mid-afternoon, a subtle shift happened. You could feel it. The air thicker, the conversation sharper. Meghan asked to review the day's script pages. She circled lines, rewrote dialogue, changed the tone of her character. It wasn't a request. It was a command. And when Orley hesitated, she reminded him of something few people knew. Her direct connection to one of the studio's top executives, a man who'd once publicly praised her for her cinematic instincts. From that moment, it was no longer a collaboration. It was control. Quiet, calculated, absolute. And yet, here's where the irony deepens. It wasn't the changes that destroyed the atmosphere. It was what came after. The noise. The flash. The intrusion that no one saw coming. A security guard near the main entrance reported hearing shouts outside the building. Not angry, just chaotic. A crowd forming. More photographers. More flashes. And then, the unmistakable hum of private guards moving in formation. Inside, filming stopped again. Jason Orley demanded answers. No one had any. Phones buzzed. Calls went unanswered. The set, once sealed, had somehow become a magnet for every paparazzi in Los Angeles. How? Who tipped them off? And why did they all seem to know exactly when to arrive? No one could explain it. Not yet. But someone inside the studio was about to leak everything that happened that day. Every detail, every outburst, every secret. And once that information got out, there would be no going back. Because this wasn't just a story about an actress being booed or escorted out. It was about a power struggle, a PR storm, and a director whose crew swore they'd never seen anything like it. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the set was doomed before she even walked in? That's the question Jason Orley's staff kept asking themselves long after the chaos had settled, long after the headlines, the statements, and the damage control. Because looking back, there were signs. Subtle, quiet red flags that no one wanted to admit were real. The kind of warnings that, in hindsight, feel obvious. But on that morning, they were brushed aside as first-day jitters. And yet, every one of them pointed toward the same conclusion. The set wasn't ready. Not for the scene, not for the crew, and definitely not for Meghan Markle. The day began with confusion, a simple but telling problem. The call sheet that had gone out the night before was wrong. The times were off, the crew assignments mismatched. Assistants were scrambling, makeup was delayed, and one of the lighting rigs hadn't been calibrated. That might not sound catastrophic to an outsider, but in a production of this scale, one misprint can ripple through every department. You could feel it. The nervous shuffle of footsteps on concrete floors. The echo of overlapping instructions. The sense that everyone was working against an invisible clock. And then came the whispers. She's early. No, she's late. She's here, but not coming out yet. Nobody knew which was true. Meghan's arrival time was a mystery. Her team had changed it 3 times already. Some claimed she'd called ahead, others said she hadn't. A runner swore they saw her SUV idling near the gate 15 minutes before schedule, but no one could confirm it. Confusion layered over tension, and the set began to hum with that strange, electric anxiety that always precedes something big. Jason Orley, calm as ever, tried to keep things professional. He wasn't new to high-maintenance actors. He'd worked with egos before. But this was different. The studio executives had personally briefed him the night prior. Treat her return delicately. She's under enormous scrutiny. That's corporate speak for don't upset her. So when the first delay hit, Jason stayed diplomatic. We'll adjust, he told the crew. We'll roll with it. But deep down, he knew something was off. It wasn't just logistical. It was psychological. Everyone was walking on glass, careful with their tone, their phrasing, their proximity. No one wanted to be the person who triggered the first incident. Because whether they admitted it or not, everyone feared it was coming. The assistant director, Emma Reeves, would later say, the air just felt off. Even before she arrived, we were all tense. Like waiting for thunder before you even see lightning. By mid-morning, coffee cups piled up on craft tables. Wardrobe was half prepped. The lead actor in Meghan's scene, a veteran performer named Jonathan Hales, paced quietly near the soundstage entrance. He'd read the same tabloids everyone else had. He knew her return meant attention, maybe too much of it. Still, he was optimistic. She'll be fine once we start rolling, he muttered, adjusting his jacket. Everyone's nervous first day back. But optimism only lasts so long. A sudden commotion near the security gate drew every head around. 2 men, unfamiliar, not wearing badges, had entered the perimeter. Security moved quickly, but not before one of them lifted what looked like a small camera. The photo that would later appear online, showing Meghan's SUV door mid-open, was taken right then. That was the first rupture. The moment the controlled environment broke. Inside, Jason was informed, but told it was handled. He didn't believe it. And he was right not to, because seconds later, his walkie crackled with chatter. Someone was shouting about crowding near the lot entrance. Someone else said, "We need to clear the path." Then silence. The kind of silence that feels too heavy to be comfortable. Finally, a crew member whispered, "She's here." The SUV door opened with that now famous metallic slam, and Meghan stepped out into the glare of the California sun. For a few seconds, everything froze. Not out of admiration, but uncertainty. She was dressed sharply, too sharply for a rehearsal day. Tailored cream blouse, pressed trousers, oversized sunglasses that hid her eyes. Every move calculated, almost cinematic. She glanced around as if expecting applause that never came. Some say she smiled. Others say she didn't. What everyone agreed on, though, was that she didn't wait for anyone. She walked straight toward the studio doors, trailed by assistants carrying garment bags and one woman who appeared to be filming on a personal device. That was the second rupture. No unauthorized recording devices were allowed on set, a rule Meghan's team either didn't know or didn't care about. Security hesitated, unsure whether to enforce it. After all, who wants to be the one to tell Meghan Markle what she can't do? Jason emerged from the soundstage to greet her, extending a hand. "Welcome back to film life," he said with forced warmth. She paused. "Thank you," she replied, but didn't shake his hand. Her tone was polite, perfectly polite, but there was an unmistakable edge to it, like a chess player sizing up their opponent before the first move. From that moment, the tone of the day was set. The first read-through was scheduled for 10:30 a.m. By 10:45, it hadn't started. The director's chair sat empty. Meghan had requested a few adjustments in lighting and sound before she'd sit. The crew complied, though some exchanged looks. Adjustments meant resetting half the stage. That took 45 minutes. By noon, Jason finally called action, or at least tried to. The first scene involved Meghan's character walking into a cafe and delivering a simple line. But before cameras rolled, Meghan stopped mid-step. "This lighting isn't right," she said. "It's not flattering for the tone of this character." Jason blinked. "We can tweak it after the first take." "No," she replied. "The energy isn't right if I don't feel it." That word, energy, became the buzzword of the day. She used it like a weapon, softly but with precision. The energy isn't right. The energy feels off. Can we reset the energy? For the crew, it meant one thing: delays. And every delay meant more tension, more whispers, more glances at watches. By 2 p.m., tempers were fraying. The lighting technician, exhausted and sweating under the beams, muttered, "If we adjust the energy one more time, I'm walking out." But he didn't. None of them did. Because behind every eye roll was the unspoken fear. What if she reports it? What if she complains? What if my name ends up in the press? Meanwhile, outside, the buzz was spreading. Somehow, word had leaked that Meghan was on the lot. Reporters began gathering near the gates. Paparazzi returned. Photos appeared online within minutes, each captioned with vague praise or snide curiosity. The Duchess of Drama returns to Hollywood. Jason tried to keep the focus on the scene, but even he could feel the unraveling. The actor playing opposite Meghan couldn't concentrate. Every time she paused for a retake, the silence dragged. Her delivery was precise, too precise. It didn't feel natural. It felt like performance layered over performance. Halfway through the day, one crew member finally said what everyone was thinking. "This set isn't ready." And maybe she isn't either. That's when the first technical failure hit. A sound mixer crashed. Static flooded the audio feed. It wasn't sabotage, just bad timing. But the moment it happened, Meghan turned sharply toward the control booth. "Who's responsible for that?" she demanded. Jason intervened quickly. "It's fine. We'll fix it." But she didn't look convinced. "I've never had this issue on a professional set," she murmured, loud enough for everyone to hear. The words stung. Crew members exchanged glances. You could feel the divide widening, her versus them. And yet, for all the tension, Jason still believed the day could be salvaged. They'd reset. They'd get the shot. They'd move forward. But that illusion shattered when one of Meghan's assistants walked onto the soundstage holding a phone. Not any phone, one broadcasting a live feed. "Who authorized this?" Jason barked. The assistant froze. She wanted coverage for her documentary team. Silence. Every head turned. Documentary team? There was no documentary. There was no approved behind-the-scenes crew. And yet, the phone's camera was pointed directly at Meghan. That's when everything started spiraling. Security moved in. The assistant stammered explanations. Jason ordered the device turned off immediately. Meghan, visibly irritated, said calmly, "They're with me." Jason replied, "They're not with the studio." And just like that, the illusion of cooperation vanished. Tension turned to confrontation. Meghan's eyes narrowed. "Do you know who cleared my deal?" she asked quietly. Jason did. And that was the problem. The deal came from higher up than him. From people whose names appeared on boardroom doors, not call sheets. For a few moments, no one spoke. The crew pretended to adjust equipment. The lead actor rubbed his temples. Outside, the paparazzi shouted her name, flashes bouncing off the tinted windows. It felt surreal, almost cinematic, like the chaos was choreographed. By late afternoon, the studio air conditioning struggled to keep up. People were sweating, tired, hungry. Meghan, perfectly composed, requested a complete set reset before continuing. Jason tried to reason with her. "We've lost half a day already," he said. Her response was simple. "Then we'll make up for it with perfection." But perfection was the one thing slipping further out of reach. As the sun dipped lower, a quiet argument broke out between crew leads. Someone blamed production for the chaos. Someone else blamed Meghan's team. Voices rose. And for the first time that day, Jason raised his too. "Everyone stop," he said, loud enough to cut through the noise. "We'll pick it up again tomorrow." That decision should have ended the tension. But it didn't. Because outside, a cluster of photographers was waiting. Again, This time, closer than before. Security radioed for backup. Jason looked out the window just in time to see Meghan's assistant whispering into her phone, smiling faintly. And in that exact moment, the thought hit him. This wasn't a bad day. This was a setup for something bigger. Something planned. Something that hadn't yet revealed its full shape. Because as night fell over the studio lot, the real chaos hadn't even begun. What happened the next morning would leave staff calling it the day the booing started. And no one, not even Meghan, could stop what was coming next. What makes an entrance unforgettable? The timing? The confidence? Or the chaos that follows? Because when Meghan Markle walked into that soundstage for the first time as Amazon MGM's newest lead, it wasn't the applause or the cameras that made it memorable. It was the silence. A silence so sharp you could hear a makeup brush hit the floor. That was the sound of shock, disbelief, and maybe a little bit of fear. It wasn't just how she entered. It was how she commanded the space. Her heels clicked on the polished floor like a metronome, steady and unhurried. Her assistant followed 3 steps behind, clutching a clipboard that no one on the production team had seen before. And when she reached her mark, Meghan didn't wait for direction. She simply looked around, assessed the crew, and said, "Let's make some history." Those were her first words on set. Now, imagine being a crew member watching that unfold. You've worked under demanding stars before, sure. But this was different. There was a weight to her presence. Not the kind that inspires confidence, but the kind that demands obedience. She wasn't just acting in the film. She was setting the tone for how it would be made. But let's rewind a few minutes. Before she even stepped onto that stage, before those words echoed across the room, something had already gone wrong. Something subtle but deeply telling. One of Jason Orley's production assistants, Maya, noticed that Meghan's team had rerouted her entry. The plan had been to bring her through the East Corridor, a low-traffic, private entrance used for talent protection. Instead, Meghan's SUV circled around to the main gate, the one directly visible from the street. And waiting outside, dozens of camera lenses. Coincidence? Maybe. But when Jason asked security who approved the route change, no one had an answer. Someone had made that call quietly and intentionally. The result? A perfect photo op Meghan stepping out of her SUV, sunlight catching the edge of her sunglasses, assistants hovering behind her. Every frame cinematic, every angle deliberate. Within 20 minutes, the image was online. The caption read, "Hollywood's Duchess returns." And inside the studio, that photo changed everything. The crew, already nervous, now realized the press was watching them in real time. Their closed set had become open season. Some panicked, others laughed it off. But Jason saw what it meant. Control was slipping, and it wasn't even lunchtime. When Meghan finally entered the studio, she radiated calm, the kind of calm that unsettles people who know they're behind schedule. She surveyed the set like a director inspecting her own vision. "It looks smaller than I imagined," she said quietly to her assistant. The comment wasn't meant to be cruel, but it landed like a thunderclap in a room full of professionals who'd worked 12-hour shifts building that space. Jason, ever the diplomat, tried to defuse it. "The camera adds depth," he said. "Once you're in character, it'll feel expansive." Meghan smiled. "If you say so." But the smile didn't reach her eyes. And that's when the first confrontation happened, subtle, but seismic. A production coordinator approached to guide her through the blocking marks. Standard procedure. But Meghan's own handler stepped in. "She doesn't need that," he said sharply. "She's got her own notes." The coordinator froze. This wasn't normal. Blocking notes come from the director, not the actor, and certainly not the actor's personal staff. Jason felt the tension tightening like a rope. He took a breath, walked over, and gently insisted, "We'll stick to the studio procedure today." The handler nodded, but Meghan didn't move. She tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "Let's just get the shot," she said finally. But they wouldn't. Not for hours. Because right as the cameras rolled, another disturbance rippled through the studio. Crew members at the south door noticed flashes, small but unmistakable. Photographers again. Somehow, despite security, they'd gotten close enough to snap through the tinted panels. Jason stopped the scene. Security scrambled. Meghan stood motionless, arms folded, watching the commotion unfold like an audience member at a show. When an assistant whispered, "We'll clear them out," Meghan replied, "Don't bother. They're just doing their job." It was a strange thing to say, almost too understanding, too casual for someone caught in a breach of privacy. But that was Meghan. Every word layered, every line with subtext, and it left the staff wondering, did she know they'd be there? Still, the show had to go on. After a 15-minute delay, they reset the scene. Jason gave a calm but firm cue. Action. Meghan hit her mark, looked into the lens, and delivered her first line. Except it wasn't the line in the script. Jason blinked. Cut. She looked at him calmly. I made an adjustment. He exhaled. Let's keep it to the script for continuity. She smiled faintly. This feels more authentic. Don't you think? Crew members exchanged wary glances. The tension wasn't explosive, not yet. But it was tangible. A quiet struggle for control playing out between star and director. And Jason, for all his experience, knew he couldn't afford a public standoff. So he nodded. We'll review both versions in playback. It was a compromise. But the moment he said it, he realized the dynamic had shifted. She had the upper hand. Over the next few hours, Meghan took charge of her own direction. She requested multiple takes, small changes in tone, in delivery, in camera angles. Some takes were brilliant. Others were indulgent. Jason stayed professional, but each retake meant more time lost, more money burned, and more frustration bubbling among the crew. Meanwhile, outside the studio, the press frenzy intensified. A well-known gossip site tweeted, "Sources say Meghan's return is off to a rocky start." Nobody in the building knew who the source was. But if you listened closely, you could hear crew members muttering, "It has to be someone in here." Inside, Meghan kept her composure. Her assistant checked her phone every few minutes, whispering updates. And though she didn't react visibly, there was something about her demeanor, a tightness around the mouth, a distant look between takes, that hinted she knew things were spiraling. But instead of pulling back, she doubled down. She began giving feedback to other actors, adjusting their tone, their timing. One young performer, clearly nervous, flubbed a line. Meghan stepped in mid-scene and said, "Try it again, but mean it this time." The set went dead silent. That was Jason's cue to intervene. But he didn't. Not immediately. Because how do you correct a star whose comeback hinges on being seen as in control? Later, he'd admit that this was the moment he lost authority over the room. Not through confrontation, but through hesitation. And just as he tried to regain it, the next disruption arrived. Louder, angrier, and completely unexpected. From the far side of the stage came a shout. "We've got unverified personnel." Security rushed in. Two men had slipped past the loading dock, neither on the call sheet, neither wearing badges. One had a telephoto lens. The other? A clipboard labeled Independent Production Notes. No one knew what that meant. But Meghan's assistant did. He sprinted across the room, whispering frantically into her ear. She turned pale for the first time all day. Jason watched, trying to read her expression. Was it surprise? Fear? Or something else? Recognition? The men were escorted out quickly, but the damage was done. The crew was rattled. The cast unsettled. And Meghan? She walked off set without a word. Straight to her trailer. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then 45. When she returned, her demeanor had changed completely. Gone was the sharp professionalism. In its place, a simmering defensiveness. "We need to review who has access to this set," she told Jason quietly. "There are people here who shouldn't be." Jason nodded, trying to keep the peace. "We're handling it." But she didn't stop there. "And I want to know how photographers keep finding me. Someone's leaking my location." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. No one dared respond. What she didn't know, at least what no one could prove, was that the leak hadn't come from a crew member. It had come from inside her own circle. One of her team had been feeding updates to a media contact, selling details of her first day back in Hollywood. Whether Meghan knew or not remains unclear. But for Jason and his crew, that realization changed everything. From then on, the production wasn't just a film set. It was a surveillance zone. Security doubled. Passes reissued. Cameras checked. But it didn't matter. The damage was already spreading beyond control. And in the middle of it all, Meghan stood silent. Poised, collected, but unreadable. As if she knew the narrative forming around her and had already decided how to spin it. Yet beneath that composure, there was one thing she couldn't control, the resentment growing among the crew. People who'd once admired her now whispered behind her back. People who defended her now rolled their eyes when her name came up. It wasn't hatred, not yet, but fatigue. The kind that builds until it breaks. And that break was coming fast. Because the next morning, when she arrived an hour late and found the crew waiting in tense silence, something inside that soundstage snapped. And for the first time since the cameras rolled, Meghan Markle was about to lose the crowd. But not to the press, not to the director, to her own cast. And what they did next would turn whispers into headlines, and silence into a roar heard around the studio. It started before sunrise. A faint buzz outside the Amazon MGM lot, the kind that doesn't belong on a weekday morning. It wasn't crew trucks. It wasn't delivery vans. It was the low hum of engines, a cluster of vehicles idling just beyond the studio gates, their passengers waiting for her. By the time the first crew members arrived, cameras were already clicking in the distance. The air felt thick, charged wrong. One guard muttered under his breath, "They know the schedule." But how could they? The call sheets were confidential, circulation limited to a handful of people. And yet, there they were, paparazzi with telephoto lenses so long they looked like weapons, positioned perfectly to catch Meghan Markle's arrival. Coincidence? No one believed that anymore. The day before had ended in tension. The mood was already sour. Jason Orley's crew were professionals, used to long hours, demanding actors, even the occasional celebrity tantrum. But this felt different. It wasn't just stress. It was intrusion. Someone was feeding the chaos. Someone on the inside was leaking information. And every camera flash outside the gate was proof. At 7:42 a.m., a black SUV appeared at the corner of the lot. The same make, same driver, same entourage. Meghan was back. Her car slowed as it approached the main gate. But instead of turning toward the private entrance, as Jason had requested, it pulled once again to the front, right into the photographer's line of sight. The shouts began instantly. "Meghan, over here. Welcome back, Duchess. Smile for us." The cameras erupted. Crew members froze where they stood. A few tried to turn away, pretending not to stare, but they did. Everyone did. Because this wasn't a routine arrival. This was a spectacle. And when Meghan stepped out, the scene looked almost staged. Perfectly timed. Perfectly lit. She didn't flinch at the noise. Didn't look startled. She paused just long enough for the flashes to ignite, adjusted her jacket, then turned toward the studio door. Some said she looked radiant. Others said she looked rehearsed. But whatever she looked like, she knew it, and she owned it. Inside, Jason watched from a distance, arms crossed. He wasn't angry yet, just uneasy. The production had rules. Closed set meant closed set. The crew's frustration was building, and the cameras outside made it worse. But Jason was a director, not a PR handler. He couldn't control what happened beyond those gates. Or could he? He ordered security to block off the perimeter, but it was too late. Photos were already spreading online. A headline hit within 20 minutes. Exclusive, Meghan Markle's Hollywood comeback. Fans cheer as she arrives at Amazon MGM studio. Fans. There were no fans. Just press. Dozens of them. Inside, the mood shifted from nervous to skeptical. Someone whispered, "That headline dropped too fast." Someone else replied, "It's like they were ready for it." Jason caught fragments of conversation everywhere he turned. Makeup artists muttering under their breath. Lighting techs shaking their heads. Assistants whispering about prearranged photo rights. It was spreading, doubt, suspicion, resentment. But the real explosion came just after 9 a.m. The first scene of the day was supposed to be simple, a reshoot of yesterday's cafe dialogue. Meghan and Jonathan, seated across from each other, soft lighting, quiet tension. But as the camera crew set up, they noticed movement through the glass window panels. Shadows. Lenses. Outside. Again. One cameraman swore he saw a figure ducking behind a delivery truck. Another spotted a red recording light flicker from the fence. Jason stopped the take immediately. "Lock it down," he ordered. Security scrambled, spreading across the lot. Crew members pressed against windows trying to see what was happening. It was chaos, not loud, but suffocating. Every few seconds, another shout echoed from outside. Then, suddenly, one voice cut through all the noise. "Get them out." It wasn't Jason. It was Meghan. Her voice rang through the soundstage, sharp and commanding. For the first time since filming began, She lost her composure. "Why aren't they gone yet?" she snapped, her eyes darting toward the entrance. "This is harassment." Jason stepped in, hands raised in calm. "We're handling it. Stay inside." But she didn't. She grabbed her phone, dialing someone quickly. No one could hear the conversation, but her expression said enough. Anger, urgency, and something else. Fear? Maybe. But if she was frightened, she didn't show weakness. She channeled it into authority. Minutes later, 2 men arrived at the lot. Private security, not hired by the studio. Meghan's team, unannounced and unregistered. They marched past the check-in desk like they owned the place, flashing generic IDs. Studio guards protested, but they didn't stop them. The moment those men stepped inside, the hierarchy changed. Jason realized what had happened. Meghan had called in her own backup. Within minutes, those men positioned themselves near doors and hallways, scanning everyone like detectives. One of them even approached the lighting crew, asking, "Who's responsible for access points?" That crossed a line. Jason approached fast. "This is a controlled set. My crew answers to production, not external hires." The man nodded but didn't move. "Understood," he said, then stayed exactly where he was. And Meghan? She stayed in her trailer for nearly an hour after that. Doors closed, blinds drawn, the air thick with unanswered questions. Who tipped off the paparazzi? Why did her own guards show up without clearance? And most importantly, what did she expect to happen next? Because when she finally emerged, the photographers outside were gone, but only because security had forced them to the edge of the property. And yet, somehow, new photos appeared online within minutes. Angles no one inside recognized. Shots that could only have been taken from within the lot. Which meant one terrifying thing. Someone inside had joined the leak. By lunchtime, paranoia spread faster than caffeine. Phones were confiscated. Crew badges rechecked. Meghan's assistant, a sharp woman named Alana, cornered a production intern in the hallway, demanding to know who had authorized external media access. The intern, on the verge of tears, said no one had. Jason called a full stop. "We're taking an hour," he announced. "Everyone needs to cool off." But cooling off wasn't an option, because just when things began to settle, a delivery truck pulled up, unexpected, unlogged, marked catering. Security checked it, cleared it, and waved it in. Except the driver wasn't a caterer. He was a freelance paparazzo. He'd signed up for a day pass under a fake vendor name, parked near the soundstage, and started filming from inside the truck. The footage would later leak online, grainy, shaky, but unmistakable. Meghan, standing in the middle of the soundstage, surrounded by crew, her posture rigid, her voice sharp. No sound, just movement. But the caption that accompanied the video? Brutal. Meghan demands total control on set. Amazon MGM chaos. That clip spread like wildfire. Within hours, it had racked up over 1 million views. And back inside the studio, everyone saw it. You could feel the betrayal in the air. Someone had breached the last layer of security. Someone had turned the set into a stage for public humiliation. Jason called an emergency meeting. Meghan showed up late, sunglasses on indoors. The crew stared at her in silence as he explained the situation. "We have a problem," he said evenly. "Until we find the source, we're suspending external access." Meghan crossed her arms. "You think this is about me?" Jason hesitated. "I think this is about the production being compromised." She smirked, just slightly. "Then fix your production." That moment, that single sentence, changed everything. The crew lost sympathy. The actors lost patience. The whispers stopped being whispers. One sound operator muttered under his breath, "Fix your attitude." Another replied, "She's gonna blow this whole project up." Jason saw it unraveling. He tried to steer the focus back to the work. But Meghan wasn't done. She stood up mid-meeting and said, "If this set can't guarantee privacy, I'll bring in my own people to manage it." Jason's jaw tightened. "That's not how this works." "Then maybe this isn't the right place for me," she said coolly and walked out. The door slammed behind her. Silence. And then, in that uneasy quiet, someone laughed. Not out of amusement, but disbelief. Did that just happen? Jason didn't answer. He didn't have to. Everyone knew. The set was collapsing under the weight of its own tension. And when Meghan returned an hour later, her personal guards in tow and her assistant carrying what looked like a media pass binder, the crew realized something chilling. The studio wasn't in control anymore. She was, or so she thought, because what happened that afternoon would flip everything upside down. The booing hadn't started yet. The confrontation hadn't erupted, but the seeds were planted right there, in that moment, when the flashes stopped outside and started inside. When the cameras turned, not from the street, but from within the walls. And the next day, the world would see a headline that no one in that building could ever take back. Meghan Markle escorted off Amazon MGM lot after staff walkout. But the story behind that headline, the chaos, the shouting, the confrontation that made history, was only just beginning. It began with a name that wasn't on the list. The day after the paparazzi chaos, the studio was on high alert. Security had doubled, the gates were sealed tighter, and every new arrival had to show 3 forms of clearance before stepping onto the lot. The message from Amazon MGM executives was clear: no more surprises. But by mid-morning, that rule was broken, by someone whose presence no one could explain. The call sheet listed 32 names for the day. When the head of production checked the log, there were 34 signatures. 2 extra people had somehow entered the soundstage, and both were with Meghan. No one knew their names. They weren't stylists, assistants, or part of wardrobe. One carried a compact camera case, the other a laptop bag with no ID tag. They arrived quietly, walked straight behind Meghan as if they belonged there, and began setting up near the makeup area. At first, everyone assumed they were studio photographers. Then one of Jason Orley's assistants asked for their credentials. The taller one smiled and said, "We're here under Meghan's authorization." That was all he said. The assistant frowned. "Under her authorization?" "Correct," the man replied. "We're documenting her process." Documenting. A word that would haunt the crew for days. Within an hour, whispers spread across the set. Who are those guys? What are they filming? Does Amazon know about this? No one did. But they weren't exactly hiding. They followed Meghan closely, during makeup, between takes, even during breaks. One was constantly adjusting audio levels. The other had a discreet shoulder rig that looked suspiciously like a portable 4K camera. Jason noticed immediately. He waited until a break in filming, then approached Meghan's trailer with calm, deliberate steps. He knocked once. Silence. Knocked again. The door opened just a few inches. Her assistant, Alana, appeared. "She's in the middle of prep." Jason kept his voice even. "I need to know who the 2 additional people on set are. They're part of her personal team." "That's not what I asked." A pause, then a quiet but firm response. "They're documenting her journey. She'll brief you soon." Jason exhaled slowly. "That's not protocol. We're on a closed set. No external documentation without clearance." "I'll let her know," Alana said, and closed the door. Inside, Jason could hear muffled voices. One male, one female, one unmistakably Meghan's. It wasn't angry, but it was firm. Negotiating, directing, controlling. Minutes later, she emerged. Perfectly calm. "Jason," she said with a polite smile, "there seems to be some confusion. Those 2 are working with my team for an independent behind-the-scenes project. Strictly personal. Nothing will be released without approval." Jason blinked. "You understand this is an Amazon MGM property. You can't film a separate production on set." She tilted her head slightly. "It's not a production. It's documentation." He sighed. "Semantics don't change legalities." Her smile didn't fade. "Then maybe we should have legal review it." The conversation ended there. No shouting. No threats. Just 2 professionals standing in the same room, speaking the same language, but telling 2 very different stories. Jason walked away, knowing exactly what was happening. A power play. Meghan was testing the limits of authority, seeing how far she could stretch the line before it snapped. And it almost did that afternoon. During a lighting adjustment, one of the documentarians stepped too close to the main camera rig. The operator, a seasoned veteran named Chris Bauer, waved him off. "You can't be here," he said. The man ignored him, crouching to capture a low angle of Meghan rehearsing a line. Chris repeated, louder, "Move." The man looked up, annoyed. "Relax, it's for her private use." Chris slammed his clipboard down. "You don't touch this set again." The tension was electric. Other crew members turned. Jason intervened instantly, placing himself between them. "Enough," he snapped. "Everyone cool off." But the damage was done. The crew's patience had finally cracked. One grip muttered, "If this keeps up, I'm walking." Another replied, "Half of Hollywood's waiting to hear this blows up anyway." And as if on cue, it did. At 2:17 p.m., an email landed in Jason's inbox from the studio's legal department. It was short, formal, and terrifyingly clear. "We've received reports of unauthorized media personnel on the lot. Confirm identities immediately or suspend production until resolved." Jason's stomach dropped. This wasn't just internal drama anymore. This was a potential liability. He rushed to find Meghan again, but she was already mid-scene. Cameras were rolling, tension simmering, and the air thick with resentment. She was performing beautifully, eerily so. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Here she was, acting out a scene about betrayal and broken trust, surrounded by people who no longer trusted her. Halfway through the take, someone noticed the two outsiders filming again from behind the lights. Jason called cut. His voice echoed louder than usual. "What did I just say about additional cameras?" The room froze. Meghan turned, calm as ever. "They're documenting me, not the production." Jason's jaw tightened. "This is the production." She met his eyes. "Then maybe you should focus on yours." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Jonathan Hales, the co-star, leaned back in his chair, visibly uncomfortable. "Can we just shoot the scene?" he muttered. But the crew didn't move. They were watching something unravel, not just a film, but the power balance of an entire set. Jason gestured toward the men. "They leave. Now." Meghan crossed her arms. "They stay until my lawyer calls yours." For a few agonizing seconds, no one spoke. Then Jason turned to his assistant and said quietly, "Stop rolling. Pull everyone out." The crew filed out one by one, leaving Meghan standing in silence. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes glinted with something between anger and disbelief. When the last person exited, she whispered under her breath, just loud enough for one boom operator to hear, "You'll regret this." That line would later spread through the studio like wildfire. By the next morning, half the staff had heard it, and by the end of the day, it had turned into legend. She threatened him. She cursed the production. She promised to burn it down. The versions changed with each retelling, but the sentiment stayed the same. Meghan Markle versus Amazon MGM had just gone from tension to open war. And if you think that sounds exaggerated, you haven't heard what happened next. Because that night, after the set cleared, the two documentarians stayed behind. They told security they were finishing backups. But one guard swore he saw them filming inside the main soundstage, long after they were told to stop. And what they captured, according to those who later viewed the footage, wasn't Meghan acting. It was Meghan talking, directly to the camera. No script. No filter. Just raw, unedited Meghan Markle saying, "They're trying to control me, but they don't realize who they're dealing with." Those clips would never air publicly, but they existed. Staff had seen them. And for Amazon MGM, that was enough to trigger an internal panic. By dawn, lawyers were in motion. Studio executives were furious. Jason Orley was summoned for an emergency call, and Meghan, oblivious or defiant, showed up to set like nothing had happened, smiling faintly as if the whole place hadn't caught fire behind her back. But this time, the smiles didn't return. The crew looked at her differently. The respect had drained away, replaced by quiet resentment and whispered defiance. Every move she made was watched, every word dissected. And that's when the production coordinator found something that froze everyone in place. A printed schedule, not the studio version, but a parallel one. Same call times, same set locations, but with extra entries. Notes labeled Personal Coverage, Project. It was proof. She had been running a second production inside the first. Unauthorized, uncontrolled, unforgivable. Jason didn't yell. He didn't need to. He simply walked to Meghan's trailer, handed her the document, and said, "End it. Now." Her reply was calm, quiet, devastating. "You're overreacting. The footage is harmless." Jason shook his head. "You've put every person here at risk. You don't get to rewrite the rules." She leaned back. Then maybe it's time someone did. And that's when he realized she wasn't bluffing. This wasn't rebellion. It was strategy. Every move, every lens, every leaked image. It was part of a larger narrative she was building. One where she wasn't the villain. She was the victim. But in trying to control her story, she'd lost the room completely. Because by that evening, word reached the top floor of Amazon MGM. A message came down to security, simple and cold. No outside personnel allowed on property as of tomorrow. Anyone attempting to enter under personal authorization will be escorted out. No names mentioned, but everyone knew who it was about. And when Meghan learned of that decision, something in her expression finally cracked. For the first time since her return, she wasn't smiling. Because the next confrontation wouldn't happen in whispers or behind closed doors. It would happen right in front of the cameras, and the entire set would watch as the balance of power collapsed for good. It always starts small. A word, a line, a single sentence that someone decides isn't working, and suddenly, the whole story starts to shift. But on that tense, electric morning inside Amazon MGM Studio 7, it wasn't just a word or a line. It was ownership. Ownership of the script. Ownership of the story. Ownership of the film itself. And Meghan Markle wanted it. The day began like a fragile ceasefire. After the unauthorized guest debacle, executives had stepped in overnight. Emails were sent, warnings issued. The set was supposed to be back under control, tight, professional, predictable. Jason Orley arrived early, hoping to reset the tone. He greeted the crew, made jokes, kept his voice steady. Anything to break the tension that hung over the room like humidity before a storm. But Meghan was nowhere to be seen. Her call time was 8 a.m. She didn't appear until 9:17. When she walked in, it was quiet. No entourage this time, no extra cameras. Just Meghan, her assistant, and an expression that looked rehearsed. Calm, composed, calculated. "Morning," she said softly, setting her script binder on the table. "Shall we?" Jason nodded, grateful for civility. "Let's pick up from scene 32. Dialogue in the cafe. The actors gathered. The crew reset the lights. Everything moved like clockwork for about 10 minutes. Then it began. "Jason," Meghan called out suddenly, flipping through her binder. "I've been looking at this scene again. The dialogue between my character and Jonathan's, it doesn't ring true." Jason sighed internally. "Which part?" She tapped the page. "Here, where she apologizes. That's not authentic to who she is. It undermines her strength. I think she should hold her ground instead." Jason walked over, calm but cautious. "It's an emotional beat. Her apology is what makes her human." Meghan smiled faintly. "Or weak." He raised an eyebrow. "Or layered." Their eyes locked for a beat too long. The crew pretended to be busy. You could practically feel the air tighten between them. Two creative visions colliding head-on. Jason exhaled. "Let's run the original once. Then we can try an alternate take." Meghan's smile froze. "You mean my version?" Jason didn't blink. "We'll see which works better." She didn't argue. She didn't have to. Because as soon as cameras rolled, Meghan did what Meghan always did. She took control. She rewrote the dialogue mid-scene, throwing off her co-star completely. Jonathan tried to follow, but the words coming out of her mouth weren't even close to the script. Her tone was sharper, colder, defiant. When she finished, she looked straight at the lens instead of her scene partner. And held the gaze a second too long. Jason called, "Cut." "Wasn't that better?" she asked immediately. Jonathan exhaled, uncomfortable. It was different. Jason forced a smile. "Let's reset." But as he gave directions, Meghan stepped closer. "I think this is the right choice. It feels stronger. Real women don't apologize for being right." He met her gaze. Real storytelling isn't about winning every argument. The line hit harder than he intended. Meghan's assistant shifted awkwardly behind her, sensing the crackle of tension. The crew avoided eye contact. No one wanted to breathe too loudly. Jason softened his tone. "Look, I get it. You want to bring your truth to the role. That's what makes actors great. But we can't throw out months of work because of one instinct." Meghan folded her arms. "It's not instinct. It's experience." He frowned slightly. "Experience as what?" She smiled without warmth. "As someone who's lived it." There it was, the unspoken weight behind everything. The shadow of her real life creeping into the fiction she was supposed to play. The tension between who she once was, actress, duchess, icon, controversy, and who she was trying to be again. And for the first time, Jason realized this wasn't just creative friction. It was identity warfare. She wasn't just rewriting dialogue. She was rewriting herself. The next scene proved it. In scene 33, Meghan's character was meant to confront a betrayal from a close friend, a quiet, vulnerable exchange written to show emotional fragility. But when the cameras rolled, Meghan didn't deliver pain. She delivered power. She raised her voice, stood instead of sitting, took over the physical space. The crew exchanged glances. This wasn't in the blocking. Jason whispered into his headset, "What's she doing?" The cameraman replied, "Taking over." When Jason called cut, Meghan turned, smiling proudly. That's how she'd really respond. You can't expect a woman like her to crumble. Jason replied carefully, "The crumble is the point. It's what makes her human." Meghan tilted her head. "Or predictable." He rubbed his temples. "You're not giving the audience a human being. You're giving them a statue." She shot back. Maybe that's what they want. There it was, the fatal difference in philosophy. To Jason, authenticity meant imperfection. To Meghan, imperfection was the enemy. The standoff didn't end there. After a long pause, she added quietly, "You didn't hire me to blend in, Jason. You hired me to stand out." He didn't respond. He didn't have to. Everyone in that room knew she was right, but also wrong. They needed her name, her draw, her celebrity, but not at the cost of the story itself. For the rest of the day, every scene became a battlefield. Meghan changed tone, inflection, entire sentences. Each time Jason tried to correct her, she countered with confidence that bordered on defiance. Crew members whispered, "She's directing herself now." Even Jonathan, professional to the core, began losing patience. Between takes, he muttered, "I can't keep up with the rewrites." Meghan overheard. "Then maybe you should try improvising," she said, half joking, half daring. He stared at her. "That's not how film works." She smiled. "Maybe it should be." By the third hour, Jason had had enough. "We're taking 5, he said, voice low, jaw tight. He walked out before he said something he couldn't take back. In the corner, one of the sound techs whispered to another, "She's running the whole set now." The reply came fast, not for long. Because outside, word of the conflict had reached the top. Amazon MGM executives were monitoring in real time through internal feeds. Every deviation from the script, every delay, every disagreement, logged, time-stamped, and escalating up the chain. At 3:40 p.m., Jason's phone buzzed with a message from the production head. "Stick to the script. No exceptions. Control it." But control was already gone. When he returned to the set, Meghan was sitting cross-legged on a prop chair, calmly flipping through her binder. She looked up and said, "We're cutting scene 34. It's redundant." Jason froze. "Excuse me." "It doesn't serve her arc." He stared at her. "You're not the editor." Her tone didn't change. "I'm the story." That sentence, quiet, confident, impossible to argue with, broke something in the room. You could feel the split form, like glass under pressure. Half the crew silently sided with her. Admiration, curiosity, fear. The other half hardened against her. Loyalty to the process, to the craft, to Jason. Meghan wasn't just challenging direction. She was dividing an entire production. Jason tried one last time to pull it back. "Look, Meghan, we can explore ideas, but not by throwing out the structure. You can't reinvent the whole film." She set the binder down and looked him straight in the eye. "I'm not reinventing it. I'm saving it." Silence. Even the air conditioners seemed to stop humming. And then, a voice from the back of the room broke the quiet. "You're ruining it." Everyone turned. It was Chris, the veteran camera operator. The same one she'd clashed with before. "You think this is about empowerment?" he said, his voice shaking. "It's about control, and you're losing the crew." Meghan's expression didn't flicker. Then maybe they weren't worth keeping. Jason stepped forward fast. "That's enough." But it wasn't. Because once the first line is crossed, every other one follows. By the time the sun dipped outside, the set was chaos again, quiet chaos, but real. The script binder lay forgotten on the table, covered in her handwritten edits, arrows, crossouts, entire paragraphs rewritten. The production assistant took one look and whispered, "We can't shoot this." Jason stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, he closed the binder and said, "Wrap it." Everyone froze. "Wrap what?" someone asked. He looked around the room. "We're done for today." Meghan didn't protest. She just smiled faintly, collected her notes, and said, "I'll see you tomorrow." But as she walked away, the look in her eyes wasn't satisfaction. It was something colder. because she knew she'd won the battle, but the war was still ahead. And tomorrow, that war would explode. Because when she returned the next day, the crew wouldn't just be waiting with scripts. They'd be waiting with voices. And one of them was about to say something that would shatter her entire illusion of control. Something that would turn quiet rebellion into open revolt.